Welcome to the Innok Robotics Lunch and Learn webinar, Successfully Scaling AMR Strategies from a Global Company like Bosch into Everyday Industrial Practice. I'll be taking a bit of a step back as the regular host today because the interview will be led by Innok's CEO and CFO, Nikolaus Rössler. His guest is Oliver Zuchowski, the head of Automation A. So I'll bring them both onto the stage now. Welcome, both of you. And as promised, Nico, Oliver, I step back now. The floor is yours. Please introduce yourselves, and I hope all our attendees enjoy a great Innok Robotics Lunch and Learn webinar.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, Oliver. Quick intro, Nikolaus Rössler. I studied mechanical engineering and business, and I've been helping Innok Robotics scale for the past few months, well, years now. And it's been great to see Innok become more established in industry and recognized by global corporations as a reliable partner. So I've invited an expert, Oliver, and that's where I'd like to focus today. Could you briefly introduce yourself and explain how you first came into contact with AMRs and why you're the right person to talk about this?
Yes, Nico, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and share some of my experience, maybe a few lessons from behind the scenes. So let me start. I spent a long time at Bosch GmbH. In my last role, I was responsible for the global mobile robotics strategy, and I also came into mobile robotics through real hands-on experience. Before that, I was logistics manager at a great plant in Italy between Milan and Lake Garda, where I first saw 2 reach trucks being commissioned. Overall, let's call it what it was, a learning project that pushed me to set the topic up properly worldwide in Bosch's central logistics organization. And ultimately, it also led me to found a startup and now to go all in with Automation A, helping companies use mobile robotics in a sensible way.
Okay, so we've really covered the whole journey now, from shop floor to strategy to consulting. I mean, Bosch has grown over time as well. It started small too. If you look at the plans on Google Maps, you can see that history. A hall added here, a new building there. What were the challenges with that kind of variety, or in your global role, how did you manage to standardize such a mixed landscape? And above all, what had to be in place to make AMR solutions truly deployable worldwide, and to make the whole setup scalable inside an organization?
Yes, you've summed that up exactly. The size of a global corporation like Bosch is a huge strength, but of course it can also be a weakness. What I tried to do was use those strengths to take some of the edge of the weaknesses, meaning in a company as large as Bosch, we already had a lot of experience with mobile robotics, and we kept building on it. And that is one of the key ingredients for making mobile robotics work in a large corporation. It's my most important pillar, as I like to call it, having the right team on board with experts in the right places. Of course, that means central logistics and procurement as well, but above all, the people on site who run the projects and make sure they succeed. And they do that best when they have a certain degree of freedom, which at Bosch we made heavy use of through standardized proof of concepts. So if a plant found an interesting robot itself, which was absolutely possible, maybe sourced locally or spotted at a trade fair like Logimat, then that site could test this new robot. Maybe one Bosch didn't know yet, and very importantly, share what it learned. And the test was run in a standardized way, so the results could actually be compared. And that was really the second essential pillar here, having reliable robots and solid technology on board. Technology that had been tested on the real shop floor. And that leads to the third pillar, the right strategy. By strategy, I mean taking all those results, the local expertise and the proof of concepts, and turning them into one central hardware and software catalog that the whole world can draw from. So in that catalog, you find robotics that works well, that has been proven, that comes with a proper service concept, that fits the corporate IT environment, and ideally can then be bought and put into operation more or less directly.
So instead of every plant running its own sourcing process, the central team acts more like a service provider and offers a ready-made catalog. Of course, every site still has its own specifics, but at least the basics are covered and you can put these products into operation without a full proof of concept, or at least have the confidence to do that. What were the biggest challenges in building that? Because, I mean, many companies already have AMRs or AGVs in use, but creating that kind of community, what were your biggest learnings when you built this approach inside a large organization?
Yes, I think the success factors are the same as with any community. In the end, it's about giving the experts on site a platform where they can share what they've learned and not immediately boxing them in with rules from headquarters that are so rigid they can't take their own steps or run their own tests. Otherwise, you kill the community before it ever gets going. At the same time, of course, you can't let that freedom become unlimited. In my central role, that was always the challenge. Finding the right balance between standardization and still allowing individual or regional solutions and even experiments, then collecting that knowledge and sharing it.
With Innok, we've already been through part of that journey, getting our solution accepted as a Bosch standard. Our approach is probably a little different from most manufacturers. We interpret the environment, real physical AI, to automate the existing plant, the brownfield, and create value for manufacturers without major changes to the infrastructure. How did you see the introduction of our Enduro and in particular the value we bring compared with other AMRs?
Yeah, in an industrial company like Bosch and in many others, almost every project is brownfield, let's say 90%. And in brownfield, the big challenge or really the customer's wish is this: I want to change as little as possible in my infrastructure just to use the robot. So I don't want to widen my aisles. Ideally, I don't want to stick QR codes on the floor, mount reflectors, or change anything else just so the robot can drive. And HGV and AMR manufacturers vary a lot on that. It ranges from basically having to turn my brownfield into a greenfield and rebuild everything before the robot can even move, all the way to minimally invasive or even non-invasive robotic solutions like Innok. That obviously helped enormously in brownfield settings like that first proof of concept to get results quickly because, well, the robot needed little to no infrastructure changes in order to run. And the second point is, how long does it take from unboxing to actually moving goods? And the range there is really huge. Here too, we've seen everything from several weeks, hard to believe, but we really had projects that took weeks before the robot worked properly, down to just a few hours. And there, I think it's fair to say Innok has set a very strong benchmark. Especially if I combine indoor and outdoor here and then look at the outdoor side as well. I don't know of any other solution that works that quickly and needs no changes to my infrastructure.
You mentioned changes, infrastructure, project delays. All of that probably hurts the ROI. Now, as managing partner at Automation A, you're looking at this through a different lens, more of a consulting lens. What kinds of projects do you recommend to clients where you say, this is where you should start? Is it really about getting to ROI as quickly as possible? Or is it ease of use to get employees on board? Is it about the learning curve? Where do you think companies should start and what should they look at next so they can maybe get to the ideal ROI later on?
Yes, my experience is that customers often struggle to prioritize use cases properly. In fact, that's exactly why our startup exists, to help with that. Customers tend to be driven by, let's say, a love of technology, or they start with the most complex use case, thinking that's where the biggest savings are. I still haven't fully figured out why. My guess is that the people responsible are simply geeks, technically minded people who want to use a lot of tech. But we found there's a much better approach. First, let the numbers do the talking. What really matters is asking exactly how much each use case would save, and then deriving priorities based on ROI. And that is the second challenge, calculating that ROI correctly. The classic commercial ROI is often, let's say, just the net value of the staff you might save. But other effects are often left out, whether that's safety or the fact that the robot can constantly record data I can use for continuous improvement. And there are many more factors. So calculating ROI properly and mapping it out cleanly for every possible use case is really the key to knowing where to automate first. Wherever it saves the most money. That's the simple advice. And if you're new to this field, you should definitely choose a simple use case. So first, of course, we look for use cases that bring savings, but can also be implemented without turning it into a huge project, because there will be plenty to learn anyway. You have change management, you have to bring people along and maybe adapt some IT infrastructure. All of that can be done in a simple first project, and then you scale from there.
We see it much the same way. Most customers naturally want to reproduce their existing process one-to-one without changing the process at all, because it's familiar. So you always have to work with the customer to make it a bit more AMR friendly or simplify it just to get those first learnings. And of course, everyone wants everything at once. The AMR has to drive indoors and outdoors, control doors and traffic lights, integrate with Wi-Fi and the fleet manager, and ideally even pass jobs back and forth with a third-party AMR, sometimes with no fleet manager at all. So we've definitely seen our share of challenges there. But what we also see is that once we've set it up, customers keep adapting it themselves. We set up the process initially, but most customers end up changing it because the shop floor is a living environment. Machines get moved around. Maybe there's a conversion project, that kind of thing. What's your experience in the AMR space, both with localization and with how important a simple user interface is so the customer is enabled and doesn't need a service technician every time?
Right, so we're back to customer expectations and the gap between what people want and what's actually realistic. And the truth is the market varies hugely here as well, in terms of what I, as the end customer, can adjust, change, or expand myself. At one end, even the tiniest change, say I move a pallet 2 meters to the left and want the robot to pick it up there, I need the manufacturer or integrator on site. Only they can do it, and every change costs money. That's a classic trap many customers fall into that often isn't built into the project budget. And that's exactly where the problem starts. It isn't covered in the purchase price. So you buy what looks like a cheap machine, but over its lifetime, it becomes much more expensive simply because you can't change anything yourself. At the other end of the spectrum, as the end customer, I can draw complete maps myself in the software, change use cases, and of course, move pallet positions. And on the market, I'd say there are only a handful of manufacturers that can really do that. And I have to give Innok credit here because you're one of those 5, I'd say. But in the outdoor area, I was genuinely surprised that this was possible at all, that a manufacturer had managed to give me, as the end user, an outdoor system I could modify and expand myself with lots of options, even for a regular key user. That's a real benchmark.
Yeah, exactly. We try to make the software as simple as we can because our commissioning team has to set it up on site too and as quickly as possible. So it helps us first and then we pass that benefit on to customers. With ongoing software updates, we want to keep making it even easier because our business model isn't to negotiate extra service work with the customer. So the process only gets improved if they pay 10,000 euros a week for services. We want customers to be able to do it themselves right away without waiting 2 months. That's our approach, but thanks for the feedback. And the plants have been really positive about it too. They appreciate being able to scan a new haul or move and change routes themselves.
Exactly. And just one thought on that, it's good for everyone because it also shows me what's actually possible. And then buying a second, third, or fourth robot is much easier because I know what I can do with it. If I don't know that, or I can't even try it out, then it's hard for me to take that step.
We also have customers who now commission their second or third vehicles themselves. Of course, we still help with Wi-Fi integration or certain interfaces, but that is exactly what's possible. They know how to map and localize the robot. They know how to draw the routes so they can adjust things themselves and bring new vehicles into the process. We've already talked over a beer or two about future trends, especially humanoid robots. And I want to touch on that here as well. Innok is currently focused more on special purpose robots. Robots built for one specific use case. Right now we're talking about intralogistics. We also have our Rhinos for irrigation and our inspectors for critical infrastructure. From your point of view, where are the trends heading? Will it be the generalist, the humanoid robot, or do we stay with special purpose robots? What's your take on that?
Yeah, as you know, I've got a pretty clear view on this. And my message is really to customers out there who are looking at mobile robotics and asking us as advisors, should I start now or should I wait for the humanoid that might be the Swiss Army knife for all my use cases? And there's one trend I find really interesting to follow. It's the trend of doing what already works today. What I mean is, for most, really for all important transport use cases, there are good robot solutions out there at a fair price with a solid service concept that let you automate today. And to me, that's what I'd much rather do than wait for humanoids that supposedly solve everything. Because the fact is, as of today, there is no humanoid that can be used productively. YouTube may suggest otherwise. And this is my personal view, but I don't see that humanoid arriving in the next 5 to 10 years either. The challenges are just too big, starting with battery life. Then there's the bigger question. Why does it need legs at all? That job fits much better on a platform. And then you're basically back to a classic cobot on a mobile base, which brings us back to what I said at the start. That already exists and it works today. So use that, and by all means, let's enjoy the YouTube videos of dancing humanoids. Maybe in 10 years we can use them to hang up the laundry, but you have to start now. That's really my message, because internally there's still a steep learning curve and you have to go through it anyway, even if, surprisingly, a brilliant humanoid comes along in 3 or 4 years. Then you're already much further along with automation and robotics, and you can simply add it to your portfolio.
Even today, we still see systems where you have to install reflectors or reference points just to get a robot from A to B. Our approach is really to make the software as simple as possible. And I'm sure it's the same with cobots or 6-axis welding robots. The trend has to be software that's simple enough that you can keep robots ready on the shelf. Then when the process changes, you can adapt it quickly and have a working use case right away. You don't have months or even years of teaching in with complex robot cells. You just use special purpose robots where they make sense, instead of a universal robot that still has to be trained the hard way. But yes, the whole humanoid robot idea is definitely an interesting one. I'm curious to see when they'll really be in use. Daniel, with that, I'll hand back to you. Do we have any more questions we can answer, maybe for Oliver as the expert?
I think the two of you, Oliver especially, may have gone into almost too much detail, if that's even possible, at least from my point of view. I was basically just listening in today, lots of insights, but let me make one very concrete request. If you have questions for Oliver or for Nico, please just type them into the Q&A box now. Now's the time, and I put them to our speakers. I do have one question that came in earlier on LinkedIn. Oliver, I'd like to put this one straight to you. The question was basically, is this webinar only for large companies with lots of sites? Because a lot of what you've talked about could probably apply to a typical German mid-size company too, right? Even if it doesn't have lots of plants, not 10 halls, but maybe just 2 or even 1 that's grown over time. And the whole idea of getting started with robotics, as you just said about humanoids, probably applies just as well to that classic German SME, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm very clear on that. I always say automation is for everyone, and anyone out there moving material should be looking at automation now, especially if they're operating in a high-cost location. And honestly, I can only quote myself again. There are excellent solutions out there, and the point is to use them now, not sit around waiting for trends. From mid-sized businesses to global corporations, everyone in high-cost locations needs to automate now. It's that simple.
Oliver, can I take that as your closing line? That was brilliant.
Yes.
Perfect. Well, with that, thank you both very much, and see you at the next Innok Lunch and Learn webinar.
Thanks, Daniel.
Bye for now.